I'm 81 years old and I'm sitting alone at my kitchen table thinking about a man who should have been sitting across from me. My best friend is dead, and the truth is we lost each other long before that happened. I'm not telling this to feel better. I don't think there's much relief left at my age. I'm telling it because I don't have many years left, and this story has been sitting in me for too long. These days are quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet people talk about when they imagine old age. It's the kind where you notice who isn't calling anymore, who doesn't have a chair in your house. I wake up early now, not because I want to, but because my body doesn't know how to sleep in anymore. I make coffee for one. I drink it slowly, like time itself has thinned out. Sometimes I look at my phone and think about dialing his number. And then I remember there's nowhere for it to go. His name was Thomas. Everyone called him Tom. I'd known him since I was 19 years old. We met the way young men used to meet back then. No apps, no planning, just circumstance. We worked at the same warehouse for a summer. Hot days, loud machines, cheap lunches eaten on overturned crates. He had a laugh that cut through everything, the kind that made work feel shorter. We started getting coffee after shifts, then beers, then weekends. By our 20s, we were inseparable, not in a dramatic way, just constant. If one of us moved apartments, the other was there. If one of us was broke, the other spotted him without keeping score. We knew each other's habits, bad moods, silences. When I married, Tom stood beside me. When his first marriage fell apart, I sat with him on his porch until the sun came up, neither of us saying much. Life felt long back then, almost endless. Friendships didn't seem fragile, they felt like fixtures. In our 30s, things changed, but not sharply. More like a slow bend, careers took over, kids arrived, responsibilities stacked up. We still talked, still met for birthdays and the occasional weekend. But the conversation shifted, less laughter, more checking the clock. I remember one evening when he invited me over to watch a game. I told him I was too tired. I had an early meeting, it was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. I had gotten used to saying no, used to postponing people instead of plans. Tom noticed before I did. He didn't say it outright, but I could feel something tighten. When we did see each other, there was a faint edge to things, not arguments, just pauses. He'd mentioned that I'd missed his son's graduation. I'd explain work had been crazy. He'd joke about how we needed to schedule friendship now. I'd laugh, but not really hear it. None of this felt like a breaking point. It felt manageable, temporary. I thought there would be time to fix it. The resentment didn't explode. It settled. It showed up in small ways. A delayed reply. A call unanswered because it felt awkward now. I started telling myself stories, that Tom was being sensitive, that he didn't understand the pressure I was under. He started pulling back too, inviting me less, sharing less. We were both polite about it, which is sometimes the most dangerous thing. By our 40s, we were friends in name and memory, not in practice. I'd hear about his life through others, a job change, a health scare, a divorce I found out about months late. Each time, I'd feel a pinch of guilt, not enough to act on, just enough to register. I kept thinking I'd reach out when things calmed down, when work eased up, when the kids were older. Life has a way of never calming down. There was one afternoon I think about more than the others. He called me out of the blue. I was driving home. I remember his voice sounded tired. He asked how I was. I gave him the short version. He said, "We don't talk like we used to." I could have stopped the car. I could have said something real. Instead, I said, "Yeah, life gets busy." There was a pause. Then he said, "It does." We hung up shortly after. No argument. No closure. That was the moment I felt something slip, but I didn't chase it. I assumed it would wait. Years passed, whole years. When we did see each other at mutual gatherings, we were friendly. warm even, but careful. We talked about weather, about sports, about other people, never about us. I think both of us were waiting for the other to go first, to apologize, to explain. Pride is quieter than anger, but it lasts longer. When I retired in my early 70s, I finally had time. Long, open days. I thought about calling Tom often. I even picked up the phone a few times. But now there was another voice, one that said, "It's been too long. What would you even say?" So I waited again. The call I did get came from his daughter. I hadn't spoken to her since she was a teenager. She told me he'd had a stroke, that he'd been in the hospital for days. I drove there in a daze. The halls smelled like disinfectant and quiet panic. He was smaller in the bed, thinner. When his eyes opened and he saw me, he smiled. A real one. I sat beside him and held his hand. It felt familiar and foreign at the same time. We talked about nothing important. About the nurses, about how bad the food was. The words I needed stayed lodged in my chest. I told myself I'd say them next time, when he was stronger, when there was privacy. There wasn't a next time. He died 2 days later. I stood at his funeral feeling like a stranger wearing the right clothes. People spoke about him with certainty, about who he was to them. I realized how little of his last decades I truly knew. Afterward, his daughter handed me a box, things from his house. Inside was a photo of us in our 20s, arms slung over each other, unaware. There was also a folded note, just my name on the outside. Inside he'd written, "I always thought we'd find our way back." That sentence has lived with me since. What can't be fixed now is not the friendship itself. It's the chance to speak honestly, to hear his side without guessing. Time doesn't just run out all at once. It leaks away. You don't notice until the container is empty. I can't tell him I was scared of being vulnerable, that I didn't know how to admit I'd hurt him. I can't ask him what those years felt like from his side. All I can do is sit with the truth that we both waited, and waiting was the mistake. If you're listening to this, and you still have someone you're avoiding because it feels uncomfortable or overdue, I hope you hear this as what it is. Not advice, just lived truth. Silence doesn't preserve relationships, it slowly replaces them. You don't need the perfect words, you just need words. I don't have many calls left to make in this life. Most of the people who knew me best are gone or drifting. Some nights I imagine Tom sitting across from me again, laughing about how stubborn we both were. I like to think he'd forgive me. Maybe he already has. What I know is that when your time gets short, you stop wishing you'd worked more. You start wishing you'd spoken sooner. I'm 81 now. I live with that knowledge every day. And this is me finally saying it out loud.